Will Straw, hello.
Hi, Tim.
Please can you just tell us a bit about your background and what brought you into politics?
Well, I think if you look at the society around us and see the levels of inequality, how some people are working incredibly hard but struggling to get by, struggling to get a decent pay rise, struggling to get a decent job, and compare that to how we were just a few years ago, it makes you really angry. It makes you want to do something to help those people. And that's why I've put myself forward to be the Member of Parliament for Rossendale and Darwen for the Labour Party. Obviously, I come from a political family, so I saw through my childhood my dad, until I was 16, in opposition through all those years of Margaret Thatcher and John Major, and then after 1997 becoming a member of the government. And that gave me real insight into the amazing things that you can do in politics, all the things that he was able to do to extend gay rights, race relations, to crack down on crime and antisocial behaviour and improves the lives of thousands, millions of people in this country. But it's only really been since I've seen what happened when Labour lost power, when the Tories got in, and the way they've divided our society, and the way that those at the top are getting away with staggering amounts of wealth, and people in the middle and at the bottom are struggling. That's what's made me want to put myself forward to try and change it.
I would say in general that's what Labour stands for.
Absolutely.
Sort out that inequality.
Absolutely. I mean, we're a party, we strive for greater equality in society. Of course, you've got to have entrepreneurialism, innovation. We've got to encourage businesses. We've got to provide the framework for doing that. But, I think that having a society where everybody who works hard is able to get on, where everybody gets a fair wage, is the kind of society where we'll be able to help businesses the most. Because if people haven't had a pay rise for years, as they haven't in recent years, how have they got the money to go and spend in the local shops? How have they got the money to support local businesses? They don't, which is why it's so important that we have a much fairer society and a more inclusive form of an economy.
Could you just talk a little bit about your work with Left Foot Forward and the Institute for Public Policy Research?
Yeah, so the idea with Left Foot Forward, which I set up 5.5 years ago, was that so often the conversation around politics and public policy is all about who's up and who's down, who's made the latest gaffe, the Punch and Judy of Parliament. And I think that's what cheers most people off. What I wanted to do was provide a news site that gave people the story behind the news. So if you're reading something about the bedroom tax, or about rising inequality, or about child poverty, or about the immigration debate, you can go to Left Foot Forward and get some really intelligent, evidence-based articles telling you a bit about what those issues are all about from different perspectives. So that was the idea with that. And then with the Institute for Public Policy Research, which is what I do at the moment, and I work primarily on energy and transport policy, what we're trying to do, we're a charity, and we've got an educational purpose, and we're trying to analyse big challenges in the country, like how do we fix our energy market so that people get a fair deal? How do we deal with buses and other forms of transport so that services that used to be there can carry on at the lowest cost for consumers? How can we do all this and at the same time make sure that we're dealing with big long-term issues like climate change? That we come up with ideas that then political parties can take forward. And I've been proud in recent years that some of the ideas we've come up with have been taken forward by the current government, and some of the ideas that we've put forward are being taken up by the Labour Party in their manifesto.
So is that very useful for you, having those two worlds in a way, the charity and the politics? Do they help each other in your case?
Definitely. I mean, I think, when I'm going out knocking on people's doors or calling people up, and asking them what the big issues are, a lot of people raise transport. I mean, we've got big issues in terms of making sure that people in Darwen and in Rossendale can get into Manchester, really thriving city, and we need to allow people to go and work there, shop there, have entertainment there, but also the transport links across the area, across the whole of East Lancashire, where bus services are so important and have been declining. Similarly, people raise the concerns, certainly until recent months, about energy prices and how they just keep on seeming to go up and up.
Would a Labour government freeze energy prices?
Yes, we would freeze energy prices. In fact, we'd cap energy prices. We'd say, ideally they go down, but at a minimum they need to stay flat. At the moment, it's very good news that oil and gas prices have come down as much as they have, but energy companies need to do more to push that down. It's no good that energy companies are saying, we'll give you a cut in your electricity bills at the end of February. Most people have stopped using their energy to the same extent as they were in December, January, February. The spring's starting to come by then. We need to put pressure on energy companies to push down prices all year round.
Yeah. On the point about bus services, I remember in my time at BLGS only 2 years ago, the bus fares doubled in my time there. Is there anything that you can do or will do to make sure bus prices are affordable and reasonable?
I think there's a lot we could do. We've just got to have imagination. What's happened with our buses in the UK for the last 30 years is that we've left it to the private market. And what's happened is that you've got some very profitable bus routes, primarily the routes going into Manchester or between the big local towns. And the bus companies don't want to run the rural services or the school bus services. They're not interested because there's not money to be made, and they want to make big profit margins. So it's come down to the local authority to step in and provide those bus services. But of course, local councils have had cut after cut, and particularly councils in the north, in East Lancashire. I mean, Blackburn with Darwen has had the sixth worst cuts in the whole country out of 400 councils. So how can they expect to put the same money in they used to? Well, they can't. And what's happened is that these bus services are withering on the vine. My view, and the Labour Party's view, is that you've got to go to the system that's working very well in London and in Northern Ireland, where buses are re-regulated. They run a bit like how we run some franchises. And you say to the bus companies, we want private bus companies to be involved in this, but if you want to run the profitable route into Manchester, you've also got to run the unprofitable route that goes through the rural villages, whether that's through Edgeworth or whether that's through Waterford in Rossendale. You've got to run those routes. And you've got to use some of the profits you make from the attractive routes for the other ones. And I think that's fair, and we've got to do it.
On the local level, what is the difference between Labour and Conservatives?
Well, I think the main difference is that the Conservatives have stood idly by while their national government have made change after change that's negatively affected people here. So why is it fair that councils in East Lancashire have faced greater cuts per person than councils in leafy bits of Surrey and the South East? Why is that fair? Why has Jake Berry stood by and voted for those changes that have negatively affected his constituents? Why has he voted for the privatisation of the NHS through the Health and Social Care Act, which now means that the ultrasound department at Darwen is run for profit, and for people going to hospitals in the Greater Manchester area, in Oldham or Rochdale, or Fairfield, the ambulance service for non-medical transfers between hospitals is now run by a bus company. This is not good for people in this area, and the Tories have done that. Meanwhile, since 2011, Labour's taken control in Rossendale, in Blackburn with Darwen Council, and in 2013 we took control in Lancashire County Council. And we have been working incredibly hard in very tough circumstances to make sure that the most vulnerable people in our communities are protected from these vicious cuts that have taken place.
What has Jake Berry done well during his time in office?
Well, I think he's certainly been out and about. He and I see each other at the same local events, whether that's some of the fantastic events that the Town Council here in Darwen has put on in the town centre, 1940s Day, the food festival that they did, or over in Rossendale at the Mayor's Ball, or some of the street fairs. It's always good to bump into Jake Berry on those occasions and have a bit of a catch up. So I think he's done that well.
Okay. Talking more broadly again, the Greens, the SNP, and Plaid Cymru seem to be supporting the working class more than the Labour Party by leading the fight against austerity. Should Labour be also following in their path?
Well, I don't accept that they are representing the working class better than Labour. Who was it who brought in the rights for many people, whether that was the minimum wage, whether that was paid holidays, whether that was the increases in maternity and paternity leave. These are all things that Labour did last time we were in office, and we did it on our own. We didn't have any of those parties in coalition with us. We did it because it was the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
What are we doing now? We're suggesting the minimum wage should be raised to £8 by 2020. We want to encourage employers to pay a living wage, and we've just announced recently we want to extend paternity leave to 4 weeks. These are the ways that we can support working people. In terms of the austerity that we've had, it was Labour who led the national campaign early on in this Parliament in 2010 and 2011, saying it's not on that you are putting so much of the cuts on the backs of the poorest. You've got to be doing more for those who are wealthy. That's why we've set out that we want to reintroduce the 50p tax, bring in a mansion tax, a bank levy, a bank bonus tax, tax on tobacco companies. All these things that we want to do so we can help working class people, so we can help families who are struggling to get by, and so we can help the most vulnerable in our society. And that to me is why the Labour Party will always be the party of the working class, but also of aspirational people who are trying to get on in life.
A Labour government would still be cutting spending, won't it?
Yes, but I think you would struggle to be any party in government and not do that. The reality is that it is not fair on future generations if we are carrying big debts forward, which is what this government has done. I mean, the amount of debt has just increased over this Parliament. They said they'd eliminate the deficit. It's going to be £75 billion this year. You know, Labour said when we were fighting the last election that we would halve the deficit over 4 years. Everyone said that was outrageous. It would never happen. You had to do it more quickly. It's exactly what the government's ended up doing. They followed Alistair Darling's policies. What we've got to do now is be responsible. That means, first of all, let's get growth going in an inclusive way so that everyone's benefiting from it, not just a few at the top. If you have that growth going, that will help bring in the tax receipts, it'll help lower your welfare bill, and that will help bring the deficit down. Secondly, let's make sure there's some fair taxes for people so we can do it that way. And yes, there's going to have to be some cuts. I think it's naive for anyone to suggest that you can't have any at all, but we've got to make sure that they fall primarily on people who've got the broadest shoulders.
How urgent do you believe action on climate change is? And would you say environmental concerns should come second to a strong economy? That seems to be the case with fracking at the moment, actually in Lancashire.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm passionate about climate change. It's something I've worked on through my work at the Institute for Public Policy Research, but also having become a dad in the last 18 months really makes you think about the world that you are bringing your son into, in my case. And I think, like most dads, I want to make sure that we don't flunk this opportunity we've got to prevent the worst effects of climate change. The way I see it, economic growth and tackling climate change can go hand in hand. There's a lot of green jobs out there. There are jobs insulating people's homes so they can bring down their electricity use. There's jobs in renewable energy. I mean, lots of people across this constituency have got the solar panels on the roofs. We've got a lot of wind farms as well. I want to see whether there's opportunities for tidal power and so on. That is a big part of things. And then in time, people are going to start using electric cars and so on. So I think, all of those things would drive economic growth.
Yeah, the technology is certainly out there, but would a Labour government go out of their way to encourage the transition to renewable energies and
definitely
less reliance on fossil fuels?
Definitely. We've said that we would bring in a target to largely decarbonise, so take all the dirty fuels, coal and gas, off the electricity system by 2030. The Tories have said they don't want to do that. So it's only a Labour government that would bring that in. That's really, really important. And then we need to make sure that you've got, the nuclear power, the renewable energy, and the energy efficiency all together. And I think we've got some very good policies for how you do that.
Immigration is going to be a key talking point in the upcoming election. What are your views on immigration in general, and what effect does immigration have on Rossendale and Darwen?
Yeah, immigration's a massive issue for people. It's something that I spend a lot of time talking to people about, and I think it's very, very important that we have those conversations with people because there has been an awful lot of new people coming into the UK in recent years. Net of people leaving, there's about 250,000 new people arriving every year. Not all of those are permanent. Some people come here to work for a few years and go home. The Tories, I think unwisely, said they wanted to cut immigration down to tens of thousands. They've completely failed to do that. But here's what a Labour government would do. I think we've got to be absolutely clear that it's the right kind of immigration that's coming in here. I don't have a problem with people coming in here who want to come and work hard, earn a living, pay the taxes and contribute to society. I think that can add to our economy and it can add to our community. But we've got to be really mindful of three things. First of all, we can't have anyone coming here who's undercutting our workforce. We can't have any unscrupulous employers who are paying less than the minimum wage. So we've got to properly enforce that policy and make sure that people aren't able to come in here and undercut. Secondly, it's absolutely crucial that people earn their right to get tax credits, child benefit and other benefits, not just something they get automatically when they come in. And Labour said you'd have to wait several years before you get access to those benefits. That seems right to me. The principles on which the welfare state was set up from the Beveridge report were all about contribution. You know, people contributing through their taxes and then being able to take out if they fell ill, were unemployed or retired, and we've got to maintain that. And then third, we've got to make sure that people come here properly integrate. They learn the English language, they get involved in their community, and that we're able to enjoy the differences between one another rather than letting it divide us.
Yeah.
I think if we get those three things right, then we can have an immigration policy that works.
That sounds good. How would you go about doing that? What policies could you implement to encourage a better integration, for example?
Well, I think first of all, we've got to be absolutely clear about people who come in here, and indeed people who are already here, learning the English language. We need to provide those courses for people so that they can learn to speak the English language. And I think we've got to say that people going into public service professions have got to have not just basic standard of English, but a very good standard of English. It's no good if you've got a receptionist at a doctor's surgery or somebody working in a school who can barely string a sentence together in English. We've got to deal with that. But I think we also need to do a lot more in our communities. I mean, we've ended up in some parts of East Lancashire with the schooling system being very divided between white schools and Asian schools. We've got to make sure that there are after-school clubs, youth centres that are bringing those young people together and their parents to build that friendship and build that community cohesion. And I think if we do that, then we'll find that people rub along a lot better than perhaps they have done in recent years.
Could you summarise to the people watching this, particularly young people, why they should vote for you on the 7th of May?
Well, I think that we face a massive choice in this election. There's a choice between, on the one hand, going forward with a society and an economy where it's fairer for everybody, where we're making sure that people who are working hard, playing by the rules, are able to get a fair crack of the whip, a decent wage. That young people are able to get access to apprenticeships, and Labour said we'll introduce 80,000 more apprenticeships. We're going to say in the weeks ahead what we do to make tuition of university much more reasonable. We want to make sure that young people who've been unemployed for a long time are able to get a job by bringing in what we're calling a compulsory jobs guarantee. So we need to do all those things for our economy. For schools and education, health service, these public services, which have been really under the cosh in recent years, from the privatisation of the health service, from what's happened in free schools, we need to make sure that those professionals, the teachers, the doctors and nurses feel valued, and that parents, pupils, patients really feel like they're getting good value from their public services. And we need a society where people aren't divided one from the other, whether that's this bitter language of strivers against skivers, or some of the language around immigration that some people have been pushing forward. We need to have a togetherness in our society. We need to feel confident and positive about the Britain we live in and take on those challenges, rather than trying to divide people. And I think that's a big choice at this election. If you just look at what this Tory government has done in the last 5 years, the economy has very clearly been to the benefit of those at the top, to the benefits of older people at the expense of younger people, and to the benefits of the south of England compared to the north. Our public services are being decimated before our eyes. Thousands of professionals in those professions that I talk to are feeling demoralised by what's happened. And I think people want more positiveness. They want to feel that there's a government that cares for them, but is doing the right thing as well.
Will Straw. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.